So the Olympics have been amazing. And I want to call attention to Alysa Liu, because when they're talking about her, they're talking about the gold medal, which is understandable, but they're talking about her comeback and about the headlines. But from my perspective, that is not at all the actual story. The real story is something else. The medal is just the outcome of the real story. The real story is about her leaving. Because if you didn't know it, Alysa Liu didn't just rise to the top, she actually walked away from it. So up until age 16, she was the U.S. national champion. In the 2022 Olympics, she won bronze. And then after those 2022 Olympics, at 16, if you can imagine, she retired, right? At the height of her visibility, fame, like she owned the world, and she could have kept right on going. And it was also at the height of expectation, like the pressure. I don't think any of us can really imagine that pressure. And she said she lost motivation. And here's something that I've said for a long time in my work. That is that misalignment between what you're doing and what your values are or what your joy is, it doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just like, I don't feel it anymore. And that's what a lot of people miss because they're waiting for the big event. So when someone steps away from something they're exceptional at, like that, most people think, oh, she's weak. She can't do it. She didn't care. She just gave up. She's a quitter. But think about it, man. She had reached that amazing pinnacle at the age of 16. So if she walked away from it, there must have been a reason. And she actually made a monumental choice when she walked away. And that was so far away from giving up or from being weak. It was an intentional choice, made really from a place of clarity. So she made a decision to leave it all for herself, for her joy, like for her life. And that, despite all the wins and all the fame. And that is choice. That's actually freedom, total freedom. And in her interviews later, Alysa talks about just wanting normalcy, like wanting to just live and feel something beyond the pressure and have fun and have a life, really. As you know, most athletes at that level don't have a life. And she even described chasing little hits of dopamine, just trying to experience life beyond that structure and that discipline that had so defined not only her, but really every waking minute of her life. And that is not lack of discipline. It's a sense of self pushing back, saying, nah, this isn't working. And one of my principles in my work is that when performance defines who you are, something in you will eventually resist. So instead of suppressing that resistance, she actually listened to it. Like she went inside and listened to what was going on for herself. And that's something I call self-governance, right? When you are in command of your own decisions, of your own self, of your own choices and your own actions. And she left. There wasn't a scandal. She didn't have to blame the sport or make someone wrong. And a lot of times there are these, dramatic collapses. It's nothing like that. She just left quietly. And to me, that's what really indicates personal power, right? Internal governance. So for the first 2 years, she lived totally differently. She went to school, she went to Europe, she traveled, she skied. Like she stepped into life as a person, not as a prodigy and not as a famous person. She just lived her life because that's what she wanted to do. And this is the part that I really find fascinating. When she came to a point, and it was not a goal of hers, it came to her when she returned to skating. She did not return to prove anything. She did it all on her own terms. She came back because it felt fun again, because she wanted to feel movement again. It was familiar, and because it felt like hers. And that distinction is everything. So from my lens, alignment always shifts the emotional tone of the effort, right? It's what fuels people's experience of being, you've heard that saying, of being in the zone. When people are aligned with themselves and what they want, and they're there because they want to be there, it's amazing, right? It's masterful. So before she left, skating was an expectation, one she had of herself and one other people had of her, right? Like they said, this is who you are. And she identified with that as well. But after she left and she lived life on her own terms, and she made choices that aligned with her values and her desires and her joy, and she came back, now skating is a choice. It's her choice. And nothing external about the sport changed, right? It's all the same. It's the same pressure. The judges were still there. Competition, the discipline just brutal, right? The Olympic pressure is still immense. But what changed was her relationship to all of that, how she showed up, her presence in that. So understanding that decision is made on criteria. You check all the boxes and is this right or is this wrong? But the choice that she made, that choice is made after those considerations because it aligns with what you want. And it feels totally different. And it's incredibly powerful. And Alysa Liu chose. And that's what's really made the difference. Now she talks about joy, about her own presence, about the artistry of skating. Like if you watch her performance, it is delightful. I mean, they're all amazing, right? Once you get to the Olympics, you can't help but be in that league. But there's a different quality in her performance if you watch it. And when someone performs from choice instead of compulsion, you can feel it, like it emanates. And then the gold medal came from that. It came from her choice to do what she really loves with the height of her ability, with her mastery. And again, if you haven't watched, do yourself the favor. It is stunning. It's literally historic, not only in its perfection, but in its lightness, in its joy, and it's been celebrated, and it is so well deserved. But here's the part that I would underline. The medal is evidence. It does not define who she is. And what I mean by that is, and another principle that I talk about is sustainable success is rooted in who you are. Success is not a result. It's not what you achieve. It emerges from who you are and it flows from aligning with what you want. So it's not an outside in, but it's literally an inside out. And that does not come from intensity alone. And Alysa Liu has demonstrated this to a T, and she's living it. She's living that sense of self, being centered in herself, and her presence. So even the commentator, right after she completed it, the commentator said, it's like she's playing on the ice and not performing, that there's joy and passion. And then the commentator also said, she's figured out a way to compete without carrying the weight of it, that she stayed loose and she was completely herself out there, right? And when you watch it, you can feel that. So can you imagine bringing your optimal self from that way? So when she left at 16, she reclaimed her authorship of herself, of her life. And when she returned, she controlled the meaning of the work. She was in this decision-making position of everything that had to do with what she was doing out there on the ice and off the ice. And she didn't eliminate the pressure, but she redefined it for herself. And she even said going into this, I don't need a medal. I just need to be here. I just need to be present and show people what I can do. Whew, that says it all, man. And that's why her performance looked so much lighter. It was like air floating in this perfection of skill sets. Artistry, as she said. Check it out. As I said, I'll post it here. And it's also why her interviews afterwards felt grounded, and her win, her gold medal performance, it didn't feel desperate or like she was strained. There was a coherence to it. And a lot of people believe, because we've been taught this, that success comes from doubling down and grinding harder and ignore your discomfort, endure, right? We've heard what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, bite the bullet, grin and bear it, all those sayings. And that does bear outcomes. There's no doubt about it, but it has a cost, right? It has a cost to yourself, to your joy, to your dreams. And that's what she proved could be totally different. Like she's redefined what success means by living it from the inside out. So sometimes the more mature move is not to double down, but to actually step back just long enough to say, ask yourself, is this still mine? That's it. From my perspective, that question changes everything. Is this still mine to do this way? And if the answer is yes, then freely and without coercion, the effort becomes clear and clean and joyful. So Alysa Liu didn't just come back. She came back sovereign. And when sense of self, that center of you and your actions line up like that, performance isn't strained. It's natural. And that's the deeper structure that's beneath the spectacle, not the medal, not the comeback narrative. It's the decision she made to return on her own terms. And that, to me, is what makes this story so powerful. Watch the event through this lens, and I think you'll see what I mean. It's magnificently ease-filled for all of its mastery. Actually, that is the mastery of it.